You're lying in bed on a Sunday night. It's 11:30. You should be asleep by now because Monday is going to hit hard. But instead, you're staring at your phone. You open your banking app even though you know you shouldn't. You know exactly what's going to be there. You scroll past the checking account, past the credit card balance you'd rather not think about, and you tap on savings. $412. Same as last week. Same as the week before. You do the math in your head like you've done 100 times. Rent is due in 9 days. Car insurance hits in 12. If anything goes wrong between now and your next paycheck, you're cooked. You put the phone down and stare at the ceiling. This is what financial stress actually feels like. It's not dramatic. It's not cinematic. It's just this low hum of anxiety that follows you everywhere. This constant background noise that makes every single decision feel heavier than it should. Now picture something different. Same Sunday night. Same bedroom. Same phone. But this time when you open the app and scroll to savings, the number says $20,000. Just sit with that for a second. $20,000 sitting there, not going anywhere. Not needed for rent, not earmarked for an emergency that hasn't happened yet. Just yours. Available. Safe. How does your body feel different? How does Monday morning feel different when you know that number is there? This is the moment I want to talk about today. Not because $20,000 is some magic number that solves all your problems. It doesn't. But because something happens when you cross that threshold that almost nobody talks about. Something shifts in your brain, in your identity, in the way you move through the world. And if you skip this milestone, if you rush past it trying to get to 100,000 or 1,000,000, you miss something that might actually matter more than all the money that comes after. I'm James, and I spend a lot of time thinking about the psychology of money. Not just the math, but the way our brains actually work when it comes to saving, spending, and building wealth. If this kind of content helps you see money differently, I'd really appreciate it if you hit subscribe and dropped a like on this video. It helps the channel grow and lets me keep making stuff like this. But more importantly, let's get into why $20,000 changes everything, and why most people completely skip the mindset switch that makes it matter. Here's what most people think about saving money. They think it's about willpower. They think it's about cutting out lattes and avocado toast and being miserable for years until you finally have enough to feel okay. They think the goal is some big round number, usually $1 million, and everything before that is just suffering through the process. They look at $20,000 and think, that's nothing. That's not even close to enough. That won't buy me a house. That won't fund my retirement. What's the point? And here's the problem with that thinking. It completely ignores how money actually works in your life day to day. It ignores the psychology of financial security. It treats money like a video game where only the final score matters and everything before it is meaningless grinding. Let me give you some context. According to surveys from the Federal Reserve, about 40% of Americans say they couldn't cover an unexpected $400 expense without borrowing money or selling something. $400. That's a car repair. That's an emergency room copay. That's a busted water heater. Nearly half the country is one bad week away from financial crisis. And when you look at the data on emergency savings, the numbers are even more sobering. The median American household has something like $8,000 in savings, but that number is skewed heavily by people at the top. If you look at younger adults, millennials and Gen Z, the typical savings balance is way lower. Most people are operating with almost no cushion at all. So when I say $20,000 changes everything, I'm not being hyperbolic. For most people, $20,000 in savings would put them in a completely different category than where they are right now. It would move them from the majority who are one emergency away from debt spiral into the minority who can actually absorb life's punches without going backward. But here's what really matters. And this is the part that almost nobody talks about. It's not just about having the money. It's about what happens to your brain when you have it. There's a concept in behavioral economics called scarcity mindset. When you're operating in scarcity, when you don't have enough money to feel safe, your brain literally functions differently. Research shows that financial stress consumes mental bandwidth. It takes up cognitive resources that you could be using for other things. People experiencing financial scarcity make different decisions, not because they're less intelligent, but because their brains are working overtime just to manage the stress of not having enough. Think about it like this. When your house is on fire, you're not thinking about long-term investments. You're not considering career development or planning for retirement. You're trying to put out the fire. That's what scarcity mode feels like. Every decision becomes about survival. Do I have enough for rent? Can I afford this grocery bill? What happens if my car breaks down? Your brain is constantly running these calculations in the background, and it leaves you exhausted, reactive, and unable to think strategically about your future. Now here's what happens when you hit $20,000 in savings. For most people, that represents somewhere between 3 and 6 months of essential expenses. It's not luxury money. It's not vacation money. It's breathing room money. And when your brain finally registers that you have a real buffer, something shifts. You move from survival mode into what I call growth mode. In survival mode, you're constantly looking for threats. You're defensive. You're reactive. Every financial decision feels heavy because the consequences of getting it wrong feel catastrophic. In growth mode, you start looking for opportunities. You can take a beat before making decisions. You can say no to a bad deal because you're not desperate. You can invest in yourself, whether that's education, equipment for a side business, or just the mental space to think clearly about what you actually want. This isn't just feel-good motivation. There's real research behind this. Studies from financial institutions and academic researchers show that having an emergency fund is one of the strongest predictors of overall financial well-being, even stronger than income in some cases. People with a few months of expenses saved report dramatically lower financial stress than people without one, regardless of how much money they make. In other words, a teacher with $20,000 in savings often feels more financially secure than a lawyer with $200,000 in income but no cushion. Because security isn't about how much comes in, it's about how much you have available when things go wrong. Let me walk you through some simple math that shows why this matters. Let's say you're making $50,000 a year after taxes, which is roughly $4,000 a month take-home. And let's say you're starting from zero, which is where most people are. If you can save $500 a month, which is about 12% of your take-home, you'll hit $20,000 in 40 months. That's 3 years and 4 months. Now I know what you're thinking. 3 years feels like forever. And you're right, it does feel long. But here's the thing. Those 3 years are going to pass whether you save or not. The question is whether future you has a $20,000 cushion or whether future you is still lying awake on Sunday nights doing mental math about rent and car insurance. And here's where it gets interesting. Once you have that foundation, everything accelerates. That same $500 a month, instead of sitting in a savings account earning almost nothing, can start going into investments. And over time, those investments grow. The historical average return of the U.S. stock market over long periods is somewhere around 7 to 10% annually, depending on how you measure it and adjust for inflation. Let's be conservative and say 7%. If you invest $500 a month for 20 years at 7% average annual return, you end up with something like $260,000, even though you only contributed $120,000 of your own money. The rest is growth. But here's the crucial part. You can't do that if you don't have the foundation first. If you don't have the emergency fund, every market dip becomes a crisis. Every unexpected expense forces you to sell investments at the worst possible time. You can't take advantage of compound growth if you're constantly pulling money out to survive. The $20,000 milestone isn't just about the money. It's about proving something to yourself. Think about what it takes to go from 0 to 20,000. You have to track your spending. Actually look at where your money goes instead of avoiding it. You have to make choices, real ones, about what matters and what doesn't. You have to automate your savings so it happens before you can talk yourself out of it. You have to resist the urge to upgrade your lifestyle every time you get a raise. You have to do this month after month after month, even when it's boring, even when it feels pointless, even when everyone around you seems to be enjoying things you're saying no to. And when you finally hit that number, you haven't just accumulated money, you've built an identity. You've proven to yourself that you can control your finances instead of letting them control you. You've developed the skills of delayed gratification, consistency, and long-term thinking. Those skills don't disappear once you hit the milestone. They become part of who you are. And that identity shift is worth more than the $20,000 itself. Here's something I want you to really think about. Once you have that cushion, you start seeing the world differently. When you're broke, everything looks like a threat. A weird noise from your car? Threat. A friend's wedding invitation? Threat. Because you know you'll have to spend money on a gift and travel. An email from your landlord? Definitely a threat. But when you have $20,000 in savings, those same situations look different. A weird car noise? Annoying, but you can handle it. A wedding invitation? A chance to celebrate with people you care about. An email from the landlord? Probably just routine. And if it's not, you can deal with it. Even more importantly, you start seeing opportunities instead of just threats. A coworker mentions a certification program that could boost your earning potential. You can actually consider it because you have the money to invest in yourself. A friend wants to start a small side business and asks if you want to contribute. You can evaluate it on its merits instead of automatically saying no because you're broke. A job opportunity opens up in a different city. You can actually think about whether it's right for you instead of being paralyzed by the moving costs. This brings up something critical that most personal finance content gets wrong. We spend so much time talking about small decisions, cutting subscriptions, making coffee at home, buying generic brands. And look, those things aren't nothing. Every dollar counts when you're building toward a goal. But the reality is that the big decisions matter way more. Housing costs, transportation costs, and your savings rate are the three things that will determine your financial trajectory more than anything else. The average American car payment right now is over $700 a month for a new car. $700. That's more than a lot of people pay for their entire monthly food budget. Over a 5 or 6 year loan, you're paying somewhere around $40,000 to $50,000 for a car that loses value every single day. And here's the opportunity cost that nobody thinks about. If instead of that $700 car payment, you were driving a reliable used car with no payment and investing that $700 monthly, after 10 years you'd have over $100,000 in investments. That's the real cost of the nice car. It's not just the sticker price. It's the $100,000 in future wealth you're giving up. Housing is even more significant. The general rule of thumb is to keep your housing costs under 30% of your gross income. But in expensive cities, people are routinely spending 40, 50, even 60% of their income on rent. When your rent consumes that much of your paycheck, saving becomes almost impossible. Every decision becomes constrained. You're trapped in survival mode no matter how much money you make because your fixed costs are eating everything. This is why I'm such a big believer in keeping your big fixed costs as low as possible, especially when you're building your foundation. A smaller apartment in a slightly less trendy neighborhood might feel like a sacrifice, but if it lets you save an extra $500 or $600 a month, that's the difference between staying stuck and building real wealth over time. Let's talk about something that might be uncomfortable but is incredibly important. Having money changes your relationship with work. When you're living paycheck to paycheck, you have no leverage. Your employer knows you need the job. They know you can't afford to quit. They know you'll accept whatever they offer because the alternative is financial disaster. This affects everything from your salary negotiations to your willingness to push back on unreasonable demands to your ability to take career risks. But when you have $20,000 in the bank, something shifts. You have what some people call walkaway money. Not enough to retire, obviously, but enough to survive for a few months while you find something better. That changes the dynamic completely. You can negotiate from a position of strength instead of desperation. You can say no to a lowball offer because you know you won't starve. You can ask for the raise you deserve because the worst case scenario, getting fired, isn't actually that scary anymore. You can invest in training, conferences, or skills that make you more valuable, even if your current employer won't pay for them. Research consistently shows that job hopping, changing employers every few years, is one of the most effective ways to increase your income. People who stay at the same company for decades often earn significantly less than people who strategically move to better opportunities. But here's the thing, you can only do that if you have the financial cushion to handle the gap between jobs, to survive if the new position doesn't work out, to take a calculated risk on yourself. Without savings, you're stuck. With savings, you have options, and options are everything. Now let me be honest about something. A lot of people get to $20,000 and then blow it. They do everything right for months or years, finally hit the milestone, and then immediately sabotage themselves. Here's how it usually happens. They hit $20,000 and think, I've been so disciplined, I deserve a reward. So they upgrade their car, or they move to a nicer apartment, or they take an expensive vacation, or they just generally let their lifestyle expand to match their new sense of security. And 6 months later, they're back to $3,000 in savings, wondering what happened. This is lifestyle creep, and it's one of the most dangerous things that can happen to your finances. It's insidious because it feels justified. You worked hard. You sacrificed. Of course you deserve nice things. But here's the mathematical reality. Every time you upgrade your lifestyle, you reset your financial foundation. That new car with the $600 payment isn't just costing you $600 a month. It's destroying your emergency fund, eliminating your cushion, and putting you right back in survival mode. Except now it's worse because you need more income just to maintain your new, more expensive life. The other trap is treating your savings as a spending account in disguise. Some people hit $20,000 and think, great, now I have money to spend. No, that $20,000 is not spending money. It's security money. It's sleep well at night money. It's the foundation that everything else gets built on. The moment you start dipping into it for non-emergencies, you're not just spending $20,000. You're spending all the future wealth that $20,000 could have generated. You're spending the peace of mind. You're spending the negotiating leverage at work. You're spending the ability to take calculated risks. Never touch your emergency fund for anything other than genuine emergencies. Job loss, medical crisis, essential repairs that can't wait. That's it. Everything else gets funded from other sources or doesn't happen until you can afford it without touching the foundation. So what should you actually do? Let me give you some practical principles that I think apply to almost everyone, though obviously your specific situation might be different. First, automate your savings. Make it happen before you ever see the money. Set up a direct deposit or automatic transfer so that the moment your paycheck hits, a portion goes straight to savings. You can't spend what you never see. Start with whatever you can manage, even if it's just $50 a paycheck, and increase it every time you get a raise. Second, keep your big fixed costs under control. Housing, transportation, and recurring subscriptions are the things that will make or break your ability to save. If you can keep these low, you'll have flexibility. If you let them expand, you'll be trapped no matter how much you earned. Third, once you hit $20,000, don't stop. Redirect that savings energy into investments. The emergency fund is just the foundation. The real wealth building happens when your money starts working for you through compound growth over time. Open a simple brokerage account or max out your retirement contributions and let time do the heavy lifting. Fourth, focus on increasing your income over time. Saving is important, but there's a floor on how much you can cut. There's no ceiling on how much you can earn. Invest in skills that make you more valuable. Negotiate your salary. Look for better opportunities. The combination of controlled spending and growing income is unstoppable over the long term. Fifth, avoid the temptation to time the market or chase hot tips. The boring approach, consistent investing in broad market index funds over decades, beats almost every sophisticated strategy over the long run. You don't need to be clever, you need to be consistent. Here's what I want you to take away from this video. $20,000 isn't just a number, it's a threshold. It's the point where, for most people, something fundamental shifts in how you relate to money and to life. It's when you stop being controlled by your finances and start controlling them. It's when you stop seeing only threats and start seeing opportunities. It's when you develop the identity of someone who can build wealth, not just someone who's trying to survive until the next paycheck. And here's the beautiful thing. Once you've built that identity, once you've developed those habits, once you've proven to yourself that you can do this, hitting the next milestone becomes easier, and the one after that, and the one after that. The hard part isn't going from 100,000 to 200,000. The hard part is going from 0 to 20,000, because that's where you have to build everything from scratch. That's where you have to change who you are. Most people skip this. They hear about 20,000 and think it's too small to matter. They want to jump straight to the big numbers, but they never develop the skills, the habits, and the identity required to actually get there. They stay stuck in survival mode forever, no matter how much money passes through their hands. You have more control over this than you probably think. The math isn't complicated. The steps aren't secret. It's not about being smart or lucky or privileged. It's about being consistent over a long enough period of time that the results become undeniable. 3 years from now, you could have $20,000 in savings and an entirely different relationship with money. Or you could be exactly where you are now, still doing the mental math on Sunday nights, still feeling that low hum of financial anxiety everywhere you go. The time is going to pass either way. The question is just what you do with it. I'd love to hear from you in the comments. What's one money decision from your past that you'd go back and change if you could? Maybe it's a car you bought too soon. Maybe it's years you spent not saving when you could have. Maybe it's something else entirely. Drop it in the comments. I read them all. And I think there's something powerful about naming these things out loud instead of just carrying them around silently. If this video helped you think differently about money and about this milestone that most people skip, I'd really appreciate a like and a subscribe. It helps more people find this content and helps me keep making it. Thanks for watching. I'll see you in the next one.